welcome everybody to tonight's event about psychedelic integration. I'm very happy to see so many people and be here today with Hannah de Waal, who's footstep facilitator at the Mind Integration Program. My name is Patrick Wentorp. I'm event manager at Mind. And yeah, so we will have around 1 hour today together. And first of all, I would like to ask you to have your microphone muted as long as you don't speak, so there's no background noises. And there will be plenty of room for you to ask questions. In this event, we will start, however, with a short dialogue between Hannah and me, which will be around 20 minutes long, where we give a little overview about integration. You learn something about Hannah and can already come up with some questions that you want to ask. For the next section, then afterwards, where we open the whole room for discussion, you can use the raise hand function, which is in reactions. If you go to the bottom of the Zoom menu, there's a raise hand function which you can use if you want to ask the question with your own audio. Otherwise, you can also use the chat, and I will just read out your question, read it out loud. This meeting will be recorded, because some people might also want to watch it because they couldn't attend tonight in person. So if you do not wish to be part of the recording, if you don't wish to be seen or something, you can just send us an email to mindinfo. I'll just post the email here in the chat. And then we will cut you out. And if you ask a question, we will replace your question with the written text. Awesome. I think then we're good to go. So it's my pleasure to have Hannah de Waal with me. She's the Footsteps Facilitator at Mind and Facilitator in the integration program. Hannah graduated from Leiden University with a master's in health and medical psychology. And Hannah, you also just before this meeting told me that you just applied for a PhD project as well, which will be about immersive breathwork and sensory deprivation, and comparing these two methods of ordered states of consciousness, you could say. So that's also very interesting. Maybe we can talk about this a little bit later. As maybe some of you know, there's many different ways to alter your consciousness, and psychedelic substances being only one of them. So maybe it's also nice if we can talk about this a little bit later with you, Hannah. So in general, you are very curious and interested about bridging gaps between intellectual research and also more embodied, more practical practices of integration, psychedelic integration, and hence you're also footsteps facilitator. Very happy and curious to have you here and be able to interview you. Welcome again.
Thank you, Patrick. And yes, very happy to be here. Happy so many people are interested in this topic. It's really wonderful to see you all and share this space with you. So thank you.
Thank you. So maybe as a icebreaker question, maybe you can give us a little bit information about your personal way. How did you find out about psychedelic integration and psychedelic experiences? When did your journey start?
Okay. Yeah, that's always a challenging one, because where do you define the start? I mean, maybe it was when I was born, maybe before, but I would say I always had some curiosity actually about altered states of consciousness. And this probably began with dreaming. So as a child, I was so interested in dream states and just this whole concept of you go to sleep and have these visions. How do you explain that to a child, right? So I think that was already a little hint of what was to come. And just having these kind of questions. Why do we exist? Why do we behave the way we do? Spend a lot of time looking at the stars and just wondering, asking these questions. And eventually, in my adolescence, mind-altering substances entered my life, as they do for many of us. And that was a new avenue to kind of explore consciousness and understand consciousness through the study of altered states of consciousness. And let's see, when I went to university, also, this was around the time that the first LSD brain imaging studies were just being published. And it was so colorful and beautiful and fascinating, and opened this whole realm of understanding the mind in a different way. So that really catapulted me into the research world. But I would say as time went on, through my own psychedelic experiences and other just general life experiences, I began to notice that my attention was very outward directed in asking these questions, and that actually the answers I was seeking lay more internally. And this led me onto this kind of process of self-inquiry and changed my relationship to psychedelics. So my motivation towards them shifted from this previous mindset of like, let's just take this and see what happens, towards a more, let's explore what comes up, which is a subtle change, but it's a much more intentional approach, a more conscious approach to psychedelic use and encapsulating set and setting and all of the factors that go into our experience. Yeah, and around this time, I was also becoming interested in mindfulness practices, Buddhist philosophy, this kind of Eastern thought. I went to volunteer at a mindfulness and sustainable living project that was set up by 2 former monks. And I remember one evening after the teaching, there was some time of questions, and we would have these kind of evenings together, completely disconnected, out in nature, have a Buddhist teaching, and then have some time for question and answer. And I asked about psychedelics. And what my teacher said still stays with me to this day, which is psychedelics open the door, meditation gives you the key. And this really changed also how I interacted, how I integrated my experiences, because myself, like many of us, open the door with a psychedelic experience, right? And then just close it, lock it again after. But this other option, this option to continue exploring whatever is behind the door, to access it, you need the key. And the key might be meditation, or it might be any other method of integration. So wonderful. So this is just a long way of telling you I was brought to psychedelic integration through this curiosity and exploring my own experiences, and eventually also realizing just how much healing there is to be done. It's like a Pandora's box, right? On the individual, on the collective. And yeah, I will stop there. But that's essentially my journey in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. That's really interesting. And the question I now have is, because you talked a lot about the self-exploratory part, you could say, yeah, where you explored everything yourself. When then came the change where you also thought, okay, I want to educate others to also do the same, to explore consciousness, and also to learn to integrate these experiences that you make, because this is what you're now doing, what you do with the Footsteps online course, and also with the integration workbook, where we will share the link at the end of the session, like a free resource where people can get a glimpse of psychedelic integration and why it's so important and useful. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about where the desire to also teach came from then.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first had my own personal experiences with psychedelics, I knew nothing about integration, and sort of just learned as I went. And I had a deep curiosity to learn and explore, but also to help others and my peers through this experience as a psychologist and a psychology student at the time. Helping others was already something that I just enjoyed doing. And really the core motivation here for creating the integration workbook is making these tools accessible and free for people, because there are so many people going into psychedelic experiences with this curiosity, but then not knowing what to do after, right? And especially if you're just beginning to learn about psychedelic integration, or you're not sure if you need it, then this is a great starting point to just experiment a little bit, to be playful in a guided way. And the idea is that if you had a psychedelic experience, that's not the end of your journey. So it's more of the beginning. In other words, it's where the work really starts. The work starts after the experience ends. And that's not always what you want to hear, but it's a fun process. It's a loving process. And this is something that I had to learn the hard way. So I would love to share this with people in a fun, in a curious, in a playful way. And I can give you an example of my first ever psychedelic experience was with psilocybin. And I had this experience of transcending the ego completely. So it felt like some part of me was kind of leaving and floating above my body. And from this space, from this perspective, I was able to become aware of my thought patterns, and specifically negative thought patterns. So I was kind of looking at myself in this way and saying, you're actually a bit self-critical. You're having a lot of critical thoughts, aren't you? And I had this experience, but then came back into my body and the experience ends. And now what do I do? Now, how do I notice my thoughts in everyday life and change them? How do I become more loving? And I didn't know. So this critical self-talk and kind of escapist tendencies also kept popping up for me in times of stress, especially. Until finally I found the tools to help me integrate them, which for me, a big part of that was mindfulness and meditation practice. But I mean, there's so many plethora of methods. And this is an example of quite a clear-cut experience, but often it's not so clear. Sometimes you have this very clear insight of this is how I'm behaving, this is the perspective. And other times you might have an experience where you know something happened, maybe you felt some uncomfortable emotions or content rising to the surface, but you're left thinking, like, I don't know what to make of that. And and you can just move on with your life and leave it, and that's completely fine. But what is likely to happen is that whatever came up will come up again, maybe in a different way, but it will continue living in the subconscious and maybe poke you a little bit from time to time. And as I'm sure we've all learned at some point, whatever you resist will persist. So this is again where integration comes in to help you accept, first acknowledge and then accept whatever is coming up. And cool. Underlying it, this whole curiosity and openness for exploration. So that's really what I want to bring to people is curiosity, openness, exploration.
Awesome, yeah. And maybe as you're already talking about the skills that people can learn from integration, and also in particular from Mind's Footsteps course and the integration workbook for beginners, so to speak. What are the skills that people can take away there? You already talked about acceptance of experiences and so on, but what are other skills that people can take away from it?
Yeah, acceptance is a big one. Our integration program in general is based upon acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a huge underlying theory behind it. Also transpersonal psychology and some other drawing upon various principles, but acceptance and commitment therapy is quite a big topic that we can also get into, but involves really cultivating the skills of non-judgmental awareness observation, curiosity, playfulness, and yeah, being able to observe your thoughts, but also and not identify with them, but also delve into them and go to the other side of really exploring, okay, what is this about? Which maybe it's sort of the opposite of observation, because it's like really a targeted feeling into a certain thought and not being afraid to feel either. So I would say the underlying principle is really curiosity.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I also underwent the Footsteps online course, and what really struck me there was that integration, as you define it and as it's defined in the workshop, is that it's not only a practice, but it's also an attitude towards life and an ongoing process at the same time. So it really comes down to this continuous learning and curiosity you just mentioned, which is a very, or for some people and also for me, if I really integrate it on a deep level, it's a very new approach to life, this openness and being able to learn.
And by the way, integration is not just about psychedelics. It is a mindset that can be applied really to everything in life, regardless of whether you engage with psychedelics or not. It's exactly as you mentioned, it's about this exploration, self-inquiry, asking the questions, and self-acceptance. So acknowledging whatever parts of yourself emerge in the present moment and letting it be there, which is particularly difficult if it's a part of yourself that you don't like or you're used to kind of pushing to the side or suppressing. And integration is, it's moving toward wholeness, right? So the word integration, or the etymology of integration, is this restoration of wholeness. So the idea is moving toward this space where you can be a complete being, if that's even possible. I mean, that's why it's also a never-ending process, right? But it's a journey that's worth having.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think that especially in our times where I think a lot of people know about or get to know about psychedelic research and therapy, and there's this for some the hope, or at least an expectation, that in the next years psychedelics will become more and more mainstream, and this would mean that there's a very effective tool to alter your consciousness, but also a very disruptive tool. So of course this brings about benefits, potential benefits, opportunities, but also risks. So the question there is, why is integration so important, especially in our time? Because I think many people hear about psychedelic substances, hear about LSD and psilocybin, magic mushrooms, but only few learn or know about integration, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly as you mentioned, it's about this creating a conscious and intentional way of interacting with psychedelics. And yeah, you have the choice in how you interact with these substances, and you can utilize it. Even utilize is a tricky word, but yeah, but you can utilize it, let's say, in living a more whole, a more fulfilling life, and whatever that looks like to you. So if utilized properly, psychedelics can really bring you closer to your values, your guiding principles, and you can use these principles to, within your integration process, as a compass, and really reflect on your experiences in the way of, let's say, did your experience clarify your values in a certain way? Did it alter them? Did it enhance them? And then how can you act accordingly? So it's really staying in touch with yourself and what's important to you. And then the other side of that is setting commitments. So acting in accordance to your values, setting goals. So for example, if you had an incredibly loving psychedelic experience, then you might think, okay, well, love is a value of mine. I would like to be more loving. How would that look like in practice? And guiding your life in this direction that you want it to, that you would like it to be.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, this all sounds a little bit like a very down-to-earth, very realistic approach. So for some, there's still this expectation that psychedelics or psychedelic experiences are like a wonder drug or panacea. But through hearing or listening to you talking about integration, this all seems to be way more like down-to-earth and more long-term than a disruptive experience that is once there and then leads to a lifelong transformation. Maybe you can say some words about that. What's the expectation that people should have about integration?
Yeah, expectation is always a tricky thing, huh? But this is a really important point, as many of us in the Western world especially are used to having this kind of quick fix mentality that we have within our medical system, and just let's directly apply that to psychedelics. So I'll have a really spiritual, otherworldly experience and I'll be transformed. But the reality is, I mean, yeah, maybe that could happen, but it's not a quick process. And this is again about shifting integration to be a mindset rather than just an activity. And even the traditional, let's say, way of thinking about integration might be that it's a point along a timeline. So you have your preparation, then you have your experience, then you have your integration, and then you're all done, you're integrated. But it's a much more dynamic process than that, and can really filter into your outlook on life.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. For the last 5 minutes before we open up the room for questions, now we talked a lot about the individual, what individuals can do to practice integration, what it means, and so on. But in the Footsteps course and to the whole approach of integration, the collective and the group is also quite important, right? And eventually, we hope to get to a culture of integration where people support each other in or with integrating their psychedelic experiences. Maybe you can say some words about how you imagine the culture of integration, this exists at some point.
I'm not sure if it exists yet, but I think it's a really beautiful concept, definitely something to strive towards. Yeah, I think a culture of integration, let's see. I think it would be acknowledging all parts of a society rather than ignoring them. So acknowledging the shadow parts of society, the parts that we like to ignore, like pain, suffering, death. I mean, if you go to a funeral in the Western world, you'll notice just how much pain we like to avoid or repress in some way. So I think it's really openly looking at all of these parts of society in a loving way, in a compassionate way, and accepting it. And by looking at it, it often diminishes, right? So with suffering, for example, I mean, there are many ways of looking at suffering in different philosophies, but within acceptance and commitment, the idea is suffering is caused, or it can be caused by two things. One of them is the avoidance of pain, or just general avoidance. And the other side is being overly attached to narratives or to emotions, which also causes pain. And we see both of these playing out currently and constantly in various cultural narratives. And the way through is acceptance, I think. And I think a culture of integration would be really beautiful and compassionate and playful. I would see it as like a playground where everyone can bring their authentic selves and be true to themselves. So yeah, I would say.
Cool. Yeah, that looks like a society I definitely would like to be a part of. Maybe as a last question before we move to the questions, and I see that Hina already posted a question in the chat. So again, as a reminder, you can either post the questions in the chat and then I will just read them out loud to Hannah, or you can use the raise hand function, which is in the menu, the Zoom menu. I think it says reactions in English. There's the raise hand function. You can also do that, and then you can unmute yourself and ask the question yourself. So as the last question, Hannah, now we were talking about the, I don't know, more the abstract culture, but when it comes down to the more practical and other people, what other people can help us with when it comes to psychedelic integration. Did you ever experience, or maybe also drawing on the tools that we learn in Footsteps and so on, where it's also a lot about peer network and peer groups and so on. How can other people help us to integrate experiences, or in general, moving more to an attitude and a process of integration?
Oh, absolutely. Community, connection are incredible tools for integration. And our integration workbook that we will be sharing with you is a more individual focused approach, which is also great to reflect inward, to really be with yourself, but also drawing on the power of the group, of the community can be, it's just different. And having gone through and now facilitating our other integration courses, so Footsteps, which is our online course, and Beyond Experience, which is our in-person offering, you really feel the connection of being amongst others who share that integration mindset, or who are at least working towards it, who are curious about exploring themselves and bettering themselves or society. And just being there, not necessarily sharing, although sharing is also really, really useful, but just being in the presence of others can be profound.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, then let's open the whole group to asking questions. I see that there's already some questions in the chat. Since you maybe let's start with this one. Since you talked about Footsteps already, maybe you can at least mention one or two tools, like specific tools or skills that are taught during the Footsteps course. What should I ask this question?
Okay, yeah. So Footsteps is it's a 6-week course, and every week we sort of focus on a different topic or a different way of relating to your psychedelic experience. And one of my favorite tools that we use is sort of what I alluded to earlier, of there's the observational part of just witnessing your thoughts, and then there's the like really kind of dramatizing your thoughts or emotions. And we do quite a bit of that. So like really just going into whatever usually it's an irrational or a negative thought, really diving into it, repeating it over and over again. And through that process of repetition, it just all becomes a little bit silly, and you realize, actually, this is not the whole story. And that's just something that I love, having people, witnessing people making this realization. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess so. Then we also have some raised hands. Chrissy, can you say something? You have to unmute yourself first, and then... I
guess I can.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see everybody. Beautiful what you're sharing, Hannah. Thank you very much, Patrick. Yeah, how to say this? I'm also working on a workshop in regards to integration, because it's my passion too. I got to know integration in the breathwork, holotropic breathwork modules, which I also shared with Andrea. of Mind Foundation. So this is my dog being silly, sorry. So my question is, how big is the part of art in what you do in integration? Because that's actually my main subject, to do integration using the tool of art to integrate stuff. So I'm just wondering, what I hear here is more like on the psychological side of things, which is really cool, but is art also part of your integrational, on your list in the tool set?
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing it up, because yes, just any kind of creative expression is a hugely beneficial part of integration. Yeah, and
cool.
Actually, so this workbook was developed by myself and David Hoyer, who is a wonderful human and philosopher. And the way that he likes to describe integration, which it's a very distilled approach, which I love to, when I'm talking about integration with someone, these 3 words is always what I say, which is remember, express, connect.
Yay!
So express is the second word, and it's incredibly, incredibly important, whatever that is, whatever that looks like for you. But I'm curious also what kind of arts modalities you're using. So.
I'm still working on the workshop in itself. It's called The Art of Integration, and I would love to share it with you at some point.
Wonderful.
Where we can connect. And I would really like to be part of the Footsteps course to see how you do this. And my question would be if it will be another time this year, as April is not working. So is there a plan to be an ongoing program?
Yes, so we have another one coming up in June.
Perfect. That's all I need to know.
So we will share some more information about that also.
That's so nice. Happy
Awesome.
to meet you
Thank
guys.
you.
I will leave time for other people to ask questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you, Chrissy. Cool. Before moving on to the other raised hand, there was a question in the chat by Hina, and I guess combining these 2 questions would be asking about what is actually a psychedelic experience, because we talked about the tools that you can use to induce the psychedelic experiences, be it like meditation or breath work or substances. But Hina asked, well, is there also maybe are dreams also psychedelic experiences or out-of-body experiences? So I know there's many different definitions. Maybe there's no one right answer, but do you somehow have a short definition or a very easy definition of what a psychedelic experience is, Hannah?
So I would describe it as a temporarily altered state of consciousness. And that can be to varying degrees. And it can also use various induction methods. So psychedelic experiences for me don't necessarily need to be substance induced. They can be through a drug, but they can also be through another induction method, let's say breath work or meditation or sensory deprivation. All of these things I'm also looking into. So there are various methods to get there, and dream states absolutely can be psychedelic experiences. I'm all for an inclusive psychedelic experience term.
Awesome, thank you. Then we have Paul Kinsella. Can you unmute yourself and want to ask a question yourself?
Hi there. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question and for arranging the session this evening. So my question, I have had 2 guided psilocybin experiences in the past 6 months. The first experience, while I found challenging, was ultimately quite healing. And I was prompted to do the second experience as I felt there might have been some more material to access. But the second experience ended up being just difficult and quite painful, with no real insights gained at all. And I guess I feel that the second experience left my brain feeling a little bit, I might use the word fried, for quite some time afterwards. So in a way, it nearly feels like the second experience perhaps undid some of the healing work of the first and yielded no real tangible insights. So my question, so in addition to, let's say, conventional therapy or, discussing it in more detail, you know, with somebody that's experienced in this field, what else might you suggest that might help with working through a quite an undefined sense of unease resulting from an experience?
Thank you for sharing, Paul. That's a really good question, and I think that's a common experience, actually. So that's really useful for you to bring that up here. And yeah, I think the first step is realizing that you're not alone, that this experience is common, that challenging experiences, these experiences that leave you feeling like I just feel lost, or I feel like the work was undid, that's incredibly common. And I like to think of our personal development as a sort of spiral. So you might feel like you're going back to the same place, but actually you're working in a spiral. And so you're always operating at a level of slightly higher self-awareness than you were before. And it's already incredible that you have this self-awareness to realize, okay, this is affecting me in this way. I'm feeling this unease in my body. I would explore it. Where are you feeling the unease? Be with it. Cultivate this sense of, again, kind of curiosity and compassion, even with the hard things. And that's where it gets tricky. And that's where it is useful to have support and at least someone that you can share with. But ideally also the support of a group or of a therapist. But even alone, just really cultivating this sense of curiosity with whatever comes up, with however you're feeling, and accepting that this is the phase that you need to be in right now, and it will lead to something else. This too shall pass, as they say, right? So yeah, a bit of hopeful compassion will get you far. And please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Then we had another question, or various questions that are pointing towards maybe the more of the theoretical psychological background of our integration process. You mentioned ACT as some of the pillars. I saw that Mauro asked whether Jungian psychology also has an impact. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the background of the integration program, Hannah.
Yeah, so I wasn't involved in developing Mind's integration program, but it was developed by some psychologists, some psychotherapists, a philosopher, a holotropic breathwork facilitator. So you can imagine there's kind of a bunch of different backgrounds kind of coming together there. And much of it is based in transpersonal psychology. So this is coming from Stan Grof's work with holotropic breathwork, and also the creative expression associated with that. So that's something that's really brought into the workshop dynamics. Lots of guided meditations followed by expression, and also utilizing non-substance methods of getting to altered states of consciousness. So whether that be meditation or music, these kind of things, which can be really, although they can cause psychedelic experiences themselves, they can be really powerful tools for integration. So yeah, so definitely transpersonal elements is a big part of it. And the psychotherapeutic part, I would say, is on par, and perhaps some Jungian as well.
Awesome, thank you. Then we have Charlotte. Do you also want to ask the question yourself?
Hi, Patrick. Thank you for that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you for that. Basically, what I wanted to ask was, I did my own psilocybin trip a couple of years ago, nearly 3 years ago now, and it was the most beautiful, profound experience I've ever experienced in my entire life. But I felt like there's things come up, like Hannah alluded to in the beginning of the meeting. It's only just the beginning. And I know, I can feel it in my heart that there's things that need to be revisited, but I'm too scared to go back. And it kind of ties in nicely actually with what the gentleman before me said, Paul, about he went back again and it was more difficult for him. And that's where my fear lies, in going back and finding this difficulty. But simultaneously, I also know that if it is difficult, that is part of the journey and that's what I need. But it's hard because I'm very scared to go back, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you advise anything, Hannah, please?
Yeah. First of all, fear is your friend. Fear is another thing to be curious about. Where is this fear coming from? What is underneath the fear? I think there's a lot of exploration that you can do there. But also, if you don't feel it's the right time to go back, there are plenty of other methods to integrate your previous experience without going straight into another trip. So that's the whole idea behind this integration mindset, is not seeking per se the psychedelic experience, but it sounds like you already have a lot of material to work on from your previous psychedelic experience. So being gentle with yourself, but exploring that a little bit further. And I would really recommend for you just taking a look at these integration materials that we'll provide, see what comes up for you. And if you need further support, then definitely reach out to us.
Charlotte, I unmuted you again, but maybe you can unmute yourself and say if that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you for that, Hannah. With relation to what you said, I've actually, along the years, I have done so much integration work in terms of holotropic breath work, EMDR, meditation, you name it, I've done it. And I don't know what it is. I just feel like the only way I can integrate what the Pandora's box, what I kind of opened, is to go back. There's something telling me to go back.
Okay, yeah. Well, if you feel the call to go back, then I think you have to listen, but be sure that you are ready. So then there's the preparation, being sure that you have an integration coach or some kind of psychotherapist, whatever it may be, someone that will help you, that will guide you, and really prepare your body, mind, spirit for this experience, because it sounds like it will be a big one for you. And I wish you luck on your journey.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Charlotte. And another person was also asking about the role of therapists in integration. So of course, there's also psychotherapists that at some point can be more useful to consult compared to the full steps course. For example, if you really need psychotherapeutic help, then we also advise to look for a psychotherapist. And for example, Mind's partner organization, OVID, which is one of the first clinics in Germany that use psychedelic experiences in all the states of consciousness. They also offer integration sessions also online. So if you want, you can also contact them. I just posted the link in the chat, Charlotte. Cool, then the next one, Jonas, you also raised your hand.
Yes, hello, can you hear me fine?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Perfect, right, so my question is also a personal one. During trips, I often have immense clarity. And it is a groundedness where it feels like I'm seeing things clearly because I'm level-headed. And I can already sense during the trip that once I'm down, I'm gonna start having this cloud descend over me and I become less aware and I forget either how simple the things were when I was in the trip. And I would really like some tips to figure out how can I maintain more of this clarity or avoid that so much of this cloud is going to descend.
Interesting. And so when you're in your experience, do you express yourself in some way? What sort of clarity is this? It's a kind of mental clarity where...
Yes, it is mostly emotional. like I'm still working on opening up emotionally. I've been very shut down most of my life. So it is often that for example, the last time I tripped, I was in the kitchen and I thought of one of my neighbors that I talk a lot with. And I thought about just sitting down in the sofa with him and just emotionally unloading. And I thought about having a conversation with my girlfriend. And when I imagined the conversation in my head, I talked with my emotions, like I channeled them. Whereas when I'm in my normal state, when I talk and even when I try and share emotional things, it is so cognitive. It is so emotionally bereft. So I think like a lot of the clarity comes from me being more connected with my emotions.
And it sounds like perhaps being more connected with your body. Yeah, so yeah, this is an interesting one. Oftentimes people say, you know, in a psychedelic experience, they feel like they're closer to reality or perhaps closer to themselves. And generally that's a feeling of supreme embodiment, really that just sense of being present and inhabiting your body. Whereas in our everyday consciousness, there's so much mental fluff and clutter that gets in the way, right? And so what I would say for you is embodiment practices could be useful, really getting into bodily sensations, whether that's through guided body relaxation or kind of a movement practice.
I'm just going to stop you because I have done those things. I've done like yin yoga for 2 hours at a time, like for weeks. And that is good, but it does not really help with this clarity. Like maybe it has another type of character.
Yeah.
I can see that this is a more complex question to answer than I had anticipated. So you are free to move on.
Well, it is definite. I'm curious about it. I'll say that. And I think that's a good starting point. And I'm sure that things will become clear. Yeah, it sounds like you're doing the right things and it's maintaining, and that sounds frustrating. So also delving into this frustration might be an interesting way forward, because it's really like, oh, there's so many layers, right? When you're getting to the root of an issue or of something, a way that you feel an emotion, what's under the frustration. So maybe one practice, which take it or leave it, would be to really feel into this frustration. Why can't I get into this clarity space? What's holding me back? Really feel it, really express it, do whatever you need to do to feel it to its largest exertion, to its largest extent, and just notice if it transforms, if there's something underneath it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonas, and thank you, Hannah. There was another quite interesting question in the chat, and maybe this will also be one of the last ones. And it was asked by Pia. How much time would you give yourself for integration in between experiences?
That's a good one. It varies. Absolutely. I mean, it can be years, but I think you just have to sort of be honest with yourself, be gentle with yourself, and trust that when you're ready to have another experience, you'll feel it. I think there is honestly endless integration to be done. I mean, even experiences I've had years back, sometimes things will pop up and I'm like, oh, that's not done yet. But that's part of the process. And I think the fact that you're asking this question already shows that you're developing, or you have already developed, a conscious attitude towards engaging with psychedelics. And that's what it's really about. It's just being conscious about, okay, when do I when do I want to have my next experience, in what setting, in what mindset, and perhaps even what intention do I want to explore.
Thank you, Hannah. I hope that answered your question, Pierre. So then let's take the last question by Tina. You raised your hand as well.
Yeah, hi, good evening. I would like to know whether you would recommend microdosing as a tool for obtaining or maintaining the experiences of a psychedelic experience during the journeys, or as a tool for integration.
Thank you for that question. This is a tricky one. There is a lot of sort of controversy around microdosing among therapists and coaches, and whether it's effective or not. I personally don't use it, but I know of people who have and have found it really, really useful for their process. And whether that's scientifically backed or if it's more of a belief in it being beneficial, it's hard to say. So I think this is one of quite a personal preference. If you feel like this kind of ritual of microdosing, of taking the substance, brings you back, connects you with that experience, then I don't think it's harmful. But whether it's beneficial it's a tricky one. Yeah, I hope that helps to some extent.
Awesome, thank you, Anna. And thank you, Tina, for the question. Yeah, I believe we're coming to an end already. There was one other question from Jonas, which might be a good question for the end. He asks, have you thought about joining podcasts, or how do you plan to spread the word about integration? Well, actually, this event is, of course, already an attempt to start this. In the future, there might be also Mind podcasts. I know this is a project in the pipeline for a long time. So yeah, maybe even this year we would start that. In any case, you can definitely subscribe to the newsletter, and then you will get to know all of the updates about the projects, maybe podcast episodes that we launch about integration, or sometimes also people from our team are participating in the works in other podcasts or events. Definitely a good place to start. Yeah, so we talked a lot about integration now, and I believe it's also time to share a little bit of a good starting point for you if you want to learn more. And one is the integration workbook that we talked about. Unfortunately, we couldn't answer every question, so please, hope for your understanding that this is not possible. But for sure, maybe there's more of these events, Hannah. We'll see if that's possible. But yeah, now we want to share the integration workbook, and it's a free resource that you also co-developed, Hannah, right?
Yeah.
And it's available on the Mind community platform, which is a free forum you can imagine for everybody who wants to register. You just have to register with your email. It's very quick and very easy, and then you will have immediate access to some first introductory integration tools. Or how would you describe the integration workbook, Hannah? An introductory tool set for integration.
Absolutely. And remember, express, connect. These are the 3 days.
Yeah, exactly. So you can definitely take a look at that. And then we also talked about the Footsteps course, the online integration journey, which is a 6-week-long integration journey. We already talked a little bit about that, but maybe you can tell us, Hannah, when does it start, and what's the structure, so that people have an understanding about the time it will take to participate there.
Yeah, sure. So we are starting our next group next week, actually, next Monday evening, and it will be every Monday evening for 1.5 hours, I think 7 p.m. for 6 weeks. We'll also have peer group sessions, which will be once a week, whenever you decide to organize them. So in total, it's about 3-4 hours time commitment per week.
Yeah, and the convenience really is that it's all online, right? You can just turn on your computer and take part. And I want to share some, like a discount code. If you have time and want to participate in the upcoming March Footsteps online course, there's a discount code, Integration Special 40, which gives you €40 discount on either of the tickets. I just sent the link now, and we'll also share the material and the link again via email if you registered on either the Mind community platform for this event or the Mind website. Then we have your email, and we can also email everything, an overview. So yeah, thank you again for taking the time, for joining us tonight. It was a pleasure to talk to you, Hannah. Very interesting to get to know a little bit more about your personal motivation, and also talk a little bit more about the whole philosophy of integration. Thank you so much for all the very interesting questions from your side. And yeah, any final words, Hannah? Was it also fun for you? Maybe we do it again at some point.
It was a lot of fun, and I can see you as a podcast host, Patrick, so definitely up for that. And
Awesome.
Thank you all for being here. Really grateful. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys. It was lovely to meet.
Indeed, it was lovely to meet. Everybody enjoy your evening, and hope to see you at another point. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, loves.